So good evening, friends. Good evening, comrades. My name is Nadra Shalhoub Kevorkian, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the 31st meeting of Cafe Palestine entitled Treating the War-Injured Child in the Gaza Strip. Our gathering today hopes to further our anti-settler colonial movement that challenges, that refuses the marking of colonized bodies and land as disposable. To do so, today we will be conversing and learning from those whose analysis explicitly emerges from those on flesh and land. So with Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitti and with the participation of Naji Al-Naji, a Palestinian Wundi with a motor disability, we will start our meeting today. As I have explained in my own work on unchilding, children are really a political capital in the hands of the settler colonial state. And when focusing on Gaza, we further realize how wounding, as Dr. Ghassan's work shows clearly, became a capital, targeting the flesh, marking the Palestinian body as disposable, debilitating it, and then commodifying it to serve and to maintain the colonial capital is important. It's not the wounding and the marking of the flesh, it is the rewounding and the overkillability with its gendered ramification when the caretakers are mostly the mothers of the child and the women in the family. So today we will learn more about wounding, about rewounding, and unchilding via debility, via disability, not only to speak and hear about victimization, but also about the way Palestinian children outlive the wound and the wounding. So one of the biggest challenges in reconstructing the war-injured child is that their growing body will always try to outgrow the war wound. Yeah, this phenomena is as true of physical scars as it is of mental health and social wounds. Israel's wars on Gaza Strip are unique in having the highest percentage of children among its dead and wounded of any other conflict in the world. For example, 30% of those killed during the May 2021 assault were children, and further 685 were wounded. During the Great Marches of Return, 22% of those killed by Israel Army snipers were children, with a further 4,974 wounded, which is 25% of the wounded, of whom 1,500 were wounded by sniper fire, leaving around many of them amputated. So Dr. Abu Sitti will share his thoughts on the challenges facing the war-injured child, physical and psychological, growing out of his experience working as a surgeon through the 4 deadly assaults on Gaza. To give enough time to Dr. Abu Sitti, please visit his details and his information in our invitation. And after hearing Dr. Abu Sitti, we will move to Naji. And Naji is a member of the Committee for Bicycles for People with Disabilities in Gaza and is a Gazan Wundi. So let me start with you, Dr. Abu Sitti. We're really honored to have you here on Cafe Palestine. أهلا وسهلا فيك، تفضل.
Thank you very much, Nadira. Thank you for this kind invitation. And I really want to start by telling everyone who is interested in understanding what we witness in Palestine, these horrific images of 10-year-old and 6-year-old and 5-year-old children being arrested by soldiers in the middle of the night, attacks and raids on schools, and what happens in Gaza, to read Nadira's outstanding book about on unchilding of Palestinian children. It was really a revelation and fortuitous consequence of the lockdown that I had the chance to read Nadira's book. And it helped me really understand a lot of what I had been seeing and trying to come to grips with over the years that I have worked in Gaza, during the second Intifada, and then during the wars of 2008, 2009, 2012, and then 2014, and the Great Marches of Return, and then the last war in May. And we have to really start with this phenomena of the fact that in no other conflict is there as many killed and wounded children as there are in the Israeli assaults in the Gaza Strip. And this, when we look at this as part of the fact that actually 92%, between 92 and 95% of all Palestinian children killed in these attacks are killed in their own homes, you come to realize that it is that destruction that happens in the home that injures these children. A lot of children who are injured or killed in the air raids that happen between the wars are killed on their way to or back to school. So we see kids caught out in these sudden outbreaks of missile attacks or drone air raids being caught and being injured literally in their school uniforms. Now, one of the excuses always leveled is this idea that this is all collateral damage and that this is an unintended consequence of the war. And so that's why it's critical to understand the Great Marches of Return, because the Great Marches of Return have that really perverse intimacy that's related to the telescopic accuracy of the sniper's weapon, that these snipers have seen the children that they have shot and killed, have recognized them to be children, and have opted to shoot them. And so when we have around 1,500 wounded by snipers in the 2 years of the Great Marches of Return, of whom 35 ended up with amputations, you realize that actually this is a critical component of the wars Zionist settler colonialism wages on Palestinians, the intentional targeting of these children. When you then look back at some of the horrific statistics, and this is really an area that we have failed to properly understand and document, both from the clinical point of view, i.e., what is the lived experience of these children? Children are not small adults, and therefore they still globally, and more so in the Arab world, which has the highest percentage of war-wounded children anywhere else, they do worse off than adults of similar intensity injuries because the health system is not catered for them. And so when you look at when you look at some of the statistics, from the 2014 war, when 1,500 children were orphaned, 140 families had 3 or more members killed, which means 1 or 2 of the parents plus a child, or 1 of the parents plus several of the children. You realize that this is much more systematic than it appears and requires a much closer look. The problem with wounding, and this is what Nadra kindly started her introduction with, when you're trying to plan reconstructive surgery in a wounded child, you have to plan the growth of that child. The problem is that the scarred tissue will not grow as fast as the rest of the body, which consigns these children to really, until the age of 18, 19, a lifetime of repeated surgery. So we know from the very little clinical literature that's been published, over a 10-year period, 20% of amputees in the Gaza Strip have 10 surgeries, with another 25% having they're injured. Can you hear me?
Listen, yeah,
Can you hear me?
you're breaking
So
up. Can
yeah.
you, please, can you come back to what you were saying?
Okay. Yeah. So once injured are consigned to, until they reach adult size, a lifetime of repeated surgeries into double digits, because if they're amputated, the remnant of the bone will try to outgrow the soft tissues. If they are burnt, the normal tissue will grow faster than the scarred, burnt tissue, which means that they have contractures which limits movement across the joints, and so have continuously these need continuously these treatments. And as you are aware, these treatments means time of education, means pain, means admission to hospital, means that members of the family have to be involved in looking after this child at the expense of the other children in the family, and loss of revenue. So the issue is that once a child is wounded in a family, let alone, as we know, a lot of these children are multiple children are wounded, that whole family then gets locked into this process of what I call the kind of, the social vortex of wounding, where the whole family almost becomes wounded, even if only a single individual. Now, with regards to multiple woundings, we know that a lot of these kids, when they were wounded, other members of the family were wounded. And so it's not uncommon in these wars to have multiple children and their parents injured at the same time, receiving treatment at the same time, some of them on the ward, some of them in intensive care. I remember in the last attack, literally we converted one of the wards in Al Auda Hospital, where the limb reconstruction service was in Jabalia camp. One of the wards just became like a family suite, where mom had external fixators and 3 of the children had external fixators, and all of whom were going back and forth, because these are heavily contaminated, heavily damaged wounds that need continuous, in the first 10 days, going back to the operating room every 24 hours. So one of the other issues that we need to be very cognizant of is that when we talk about the clinical, we have to talk about the 2 parts of the clinical, the mental health part and the physical. And then we have to talk about the social and the political. And this kind of almost Fanonian praxis is critical for our understanding of what happens to Palestinian children. And therefore, the other characteristics that we see is which affects mental health, and particularly affects children, is the wounding, the traumatic wounding, the loss of sense of security when the parents are wounded at the same time, the loss of sense of security when the wounding happens in the home, which for a child has to be the safest place there is, and the disfigurement and the disability the wounding leaves afterwards. Then we have this horrendous phenomena in Gaza, which is emerging more and more with each Israeli attack, which is rewounding. That the majority of people that are now being wounded in the last attacks on Gaza have been wounded previously, either in the first Intifada or the second Intifada or the wars. There is an estimate, and this is very difficult because of the nature of at least the first Intifada, that 250,000 of Gaza's population were wounded since the beginning of the first Intifada. So if that is almost a quarter of its current population, And so as a phenomena, wounding becomes a social phenomenon, an issue where people, it's a exogenous factor that shapes people's lives in Gaza, in addition to the destruction of the economy, the destruction of the infrastructure. And therefore, wounding has become a part of the lived experience of both children in Gaza and adults in Gaza. 20% of the almost 1,800 amputees in Gaza were wounded as children. And so the experience of the loss of the limb, the surgeries associated with the loss of the limb, the lack of mobility associated with the loss of the limb, is a critical part of that lived experience of wounding. And what we understand, we know from our own Palestinian experience, unfortunately, is this issue that the war wounded will always outlive the political projects that they were wounded in. And by that, I mean in all wars, the problem with war wounds and what differentiates war wounds from other forms of trauma that happen in life, in civilian life, is that the wound will always carry the narrative of the war. The wound tells you about who was injured where, with whom, fighting with whom, against whom. And that narrative stays with the wounded the rest of their life. If in Lebanon, if you were wounded in the civil war, if you're wounded in Tal Zatar, if you're wounded in the 82 invasion, that wound will, or the camp war, that wound will always carry that narrative. What we find is that narrative, even if initially it coincides with the political narrative of that political elite, i.e. it coincides with the project of the elite, the project of the PLO in the 70s, the project of the fighting, the project of the Iraq-Iran war, then eventually it will fall out of favor. So no longer will you be the hero of that war. And therefore, the reason that is significant is that narrative, unless it coincides or supports the narrative of the political elite, then becomes a disincentive to access to healthcare, i.e. when you're no longer a hero of the first intifada, and now that, and we see this in the West Bank, how the wounded of the first and second intifada were treated by the previous PLO leadership and currently by the current PA leadership, i.e. that these wounded are hidden away rather than celebrated and treated in the best hospitals as used to be the case. And so when you're wounded as a child, as an adult, there's a good chance that narrative will no longer be there. The other last thing which we need to understand, which is now emerging as kind of early data, is that wounding so severe wounding in these children and in young adults accelerates the emergence of non-communicable diseases in late life. So it seems that the physiological trauma of that wounding increases the risks of ischemic heart disease, diabetes, hypertension to emerge much earlier. And so some of the work being done at Imperial College is showing that even when they are young men and still have kind of reserve, they are showing the initial pathological and physiological symptoms of, not symptoms, sorry, pathological indicators of early development of ischemic heart disease. And therefore, I want to kind of summarize as there is an intentional targeting of Palestinian children. We saw it in the first Intifada, we saw it in the second Intifada, and we see it in Gaza as part of the Israeli military campaigns against Gaza, that the destruction and the debilitation of the health system means that that health system does not have the ability to give these children the quality of care that they deserve and the lifetime support that they require in terms of the reconstructive needs. That health system also is unable to properly, in a non-siloed way, in an integrated and multidisciplinary way, provide these children with their mental health needs and with their educational needs to help them through the treatment journey until they become adults. And then in order to be able to do that, to ensure that they don't get re-injured in the next attack and the one after that. And so that we need to, this is a call for a kind of multidisciplinary joint approach between clinicians, physical clinicians and mental health clinicians and social scientists, for us to understand how settler colonialism sees the body of the native as a continuation of the battlefield. The problem with settler colonialism and what differentiates settler colonialism from other forms of occupation is that settler colonialism starts on the day after the land is conquered. And therefore, the battlefield becomes the mind and the body of the indigenous population. And therefore, we see, in my opinion, different patterns of injuring for different purposes in settler colonialism than we see in other wars. And the aim of and as you alluded to, with the emergence of Israel as a leading producer of militarized policing security, i.e. Technologies, i.e. that new field which merges military with population control as a form of policing. The emergence of Israel as a leading producer of that kind of technology, whether it's facial recognition or whether it's Pegasus or whether it's drones or whether it's all of those things that now Israel and its arms manufacturers openly say that they are ahead of the game because they are, as one of the executives of one of the Israeli arms company said, we're just 10 minutes drive from the lab, referring to Gaza. We need to kind of understand how Israel has managed to commodify wounding of Palestinians and then create a mechanism by which this commodification is then sold as a form of income generation or capital surplus production. And so, whereas in South Africa, the natives were sent to the ground to excavate and mine the ground, in the example of Zionist settler colonialism and Palestine, the mine is the Palestinian body, and the wounding becomes a form of value extraction and excavation to create capital, and therefore it becomes an added incentive for the continuous attacks on Gaza and on Palestinians everywhere, not just in Gaza, in Palestine and inside 48. So suddenly Zionism has evolved from being a unique settler colonialism which did not need the bodies of the natives as part of kind of surplus value creation, to now using them as a form of raw material for the production of advanced military hardware. So I will end here, and thank you again for your invitation.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ghassan. It's hard to listen to and listen to the various insights that you're putting on our table, that the health system is not catered for children, that the wounding is a major loss, that people in Gaza are trapped in their re-wounding and therefore the need to read the wound. And especially in the focus on the wounded child and how the body of the native is a battlefield exactly. I think that you're reminding me of two amazing Palestinian, one Palestinian, one non-Palestinian scholar, Darrell Lee and Omar Salamanca, that talks about how Gaza became a laboratory and therefore the commodification of the body in order to be used later as combat proven, but also your insights remind me of the Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask, where he really talks that the only way to understand and to expel coloniality is to dig into the flesh. And what you took us today is really your work as a surgeon to dig into the flesh. And that takes me to our second speaker that really have experienced that digging in the flesh. And I'm honored to introduce Naji Naji. And Naji is a Gazan Wundi who have experienced the wounding as a child. Naji, are you with us? Masal khair. Good evening.
مساء النور.
Yeah.
مساء النور.
Ahla wa sahla. And thank you for being with us. Naji will be speaking in Arabic, and Lama Khouri kindly agreed to translate. And if Rasmi is there, I can also, if possible, ask for her help. So Naji, can you really share with us your own experience, your own testimony of being a wounded child and of a person who lost your limb? Your own experience of what Dr. Ghassan was talking about, the wounding as loss, the trapped in the wound, and later on take us where you stand today with the group of the wounded that are biking, creating a new mode of hope, a new path of hope. So مساء الخير and تفضل ناجي.
مساء النور. أنا بتمنى أكون فهمت السؤال بس غالبا فهمت أو بداية الحديث.
تجربتك.
تمام أوكي. هلا أنا بحب أعرف حالي بالمختصر. أنا اسمي ناجي من سكان قطاع غزة. عمري 30 سنة، من الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة الحركية. فقدت رجلي عام 2007.
لحظة نعطي لما بتقدر الترجمة.
Yes, of course, yes. So my name is Naji. I'm 30 years old. I am a resident of Gaza, and I am one of the mobilizers of the action for disabled individuals.
كانت فترة إصابتي بعام 2007 كان عمري 15 سنة، كنت طفل في هذاك الوقت.
I was injured in 2007 when I was at that time 13 years old.
مش سهل الإنسان إنه يفقد جزء من جسده بالذات لو كان في بداية العمر أو في الطفولة. هذا بيفرض تحدي كثير كبير على الشخص أيا كان عمره كبير أو صغير.
It's not easy to lose a limb no matter what your age is, whether you're old or young.
هاي التجربة بتفرض تحديات كثير على الشخص إنه يرجع يكمل حياته برجل واحدة أو بإيد واحدة، ممكن بعين واحدة.
Losing an arm or a leg or even an eye creates difficulties and obstacles one has to address in life.
And to come back to life with one leg is a major challenge.
هذا بيخلينا قدام تحدي كبير. التحدي هذا إما خيارين أمامه، إما الإنسان إنه يستمر مع الإعاقة بدون أي حالة إيجابية، أو إنه يكون في حدا داعم له محتضن له في هاي المرحلة الصعبة لحتى يكمل حياته.
And the injured would end up with two options: either to give up and surrender to the injury, or to fight and survive it. But to do so, you need a holding environment or a supportive embrace from people around you.
إذا توفرت البيئة الحاضنة أو الأسرة أو العائلة أو الأصدقاء الداعمين للشخص اللي فقد شيء من جسده، هذا بخليه في بداية الطريق إنه يكمل حياته من جديد.
And the availability of a supportive environment and a holding environment assists the individual to start life all over again.
أنا بعد ما فقدت رجلي ب4 شهور ركبت أول طرف صناعي إلي، بدأت نوعا ما إن أقدر أمارس حياتي بشكل مبسط مثل قبل الإصابة.
So 4 months after I lost my limb, I had a prosthetic leg, and which assisted me in the beginning, assisted me somewhat in having a life similar to the period prior to the injury.
كان عندي شغف كبير إني أرجع لمدرستي لحياتي. ما كانش سهل الموضوع في البداية، لكن بالتشجيع المستمر قدرت إني أتخطى مرحلة كثير صعبة.
I was really anxious and worried about returning back to my life, to school, to my social life. But then with the social support that I had and the environmental support from friends and loved ones, I was able to overcome many obstacles.
كان في دعم من المدرسين في المدرسة إلي، كان في تشجيع لإشراكي في كافة الأنشطة، ما كانوا يقصوني بسبب الإعاقة.
And my teachers were quite supportive. They did not sideline me because of the injury.
هاي التجارب خلت عندي شغف أكثر. بعدها كملت حياتي التعليم الجامعي، انطلقت في حياتي، اهتميت في قضية الإعاقة وحياتي مع هاي الإعاقة.
And this experience gave me the impetus to have a good life. I went to university and I became quite involved in issues related to loss of limbs and injuries of this nature.
هاي التجارب خلت عندي فكرة إنه كل إنسان بصير عنده فقد في أحد أعضاء جسده أو بصير عنده إعاقة، هو بكون فعلا لدعم إما نفسي إما أدوات مساعدة أو معنوي أو اجتماعي لحتى يقدر يكمل حياته.
You know, I want to say Rasmia corrected me. It's a disability advocacy. So Naji was saying that you know what he learned from this experience, that you could lose a limb and you could have such a difficult experience, but you could actually move forward with your life and have a good life.
بعد هيك من كثر التجارب اللي خضتها في حياتي الرياضية الخاصة برياضة الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، كان عندي حسيت مسؤولية هيك خاصة فيه كناجي، إنه أنا كثير تجارب بمر فيها لازم أنقلها لأقراني من ذوي الإعاقة لحتى يتخطوا كثير حواجز وكثير صعوبات.
The experience I had even with my disability, I was able to engage in sports and I learned a lot from it, which gave me the deep desire to help people like me who also suffer from injuries of this nature.
اللي بدي أركز عليه أكثر في هاي المداخلة وهاي الكلمة تجربتي صراحة اللي أنا بفتخر كثير فيها في الفترة الأخيرة.
What I would like to focus on is my own experience, which I'm very proud of, particularly in the recent history.
يعني هاي التجربة صارت نتيجة الواقع اللي فرض على العالم. يمكن هو كان أزمة بالنسبة للعالم، بس أنا بالنسبة لي كان كثير إشي مميز اللي هي جائحة COVID-19.
The experience of COVID-19 might have been extremely difficult for many people, but for me, it gave me a positive, it gave me an opportunity to express myself.
فترة الإغلاق اللي فرض على العالم جميعا، صراحة أنا رياضي بلعب كرة قدم لمبتلي الأطراف، بمارس رياضة ألعاب القوى كمان للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، لكن ما في ملاعب، ما في تجمعات، الكل كان في البيت.
I engage a lot in sports. I'm an athlete. I participate in soccer or football for disabled individuals, and during COVID-19 with the lockdown and all, there was no space to actually practice these sports.
بالإضافة للقاءات المستمرة مع الأشخاص بكافة أنواع إعاقاتهم في الاتحاد الفلسطيني العام للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة، كل هاي الشغلات تعطلت بسبب الإغلاق اللي فرض على العالم.
And most of the activities related to the advocacy work I have been doing was also put on hold.
نتيجة الإغلاق صراحة كلنا شعرنا في الملل، فكان في عندي شوي ضغط إن أنا لازم أعمل إشي، حاب أطلع، بس بدنا نحافظ كمان على سلامتنا في نفس الوقت، نحمي أنفسنا.
And I felt the boredom everybody was feeling, and I really wanted to go outside and engage with life, but I realized that I cannot do it because I could risk infecting other people with COVID-19.
في يوم صراحة أجاني فضول أستخدم الدراجة الهوائية الخاصة بأخوي الأصغر مني. كانت هيك تجربة شوية فيها صعوبة، فيها تحدي، كوني بستخدم رجل صناعية أو طرف صناعي.
So it occurred to me that I actually could ride my brother's bike, which was difficult because I have a prosthetic leg.
استخدمت الدراجة طبعا بمساعدة أخوي، وكان بيراقبني إنه تحدي كانت. شوي شوي لقيت إنه الموضوع ممكن نعمل منه إشي، ممكن أمشي بهاي الدراجة. مشيت شوي في الشارع مقابل البيت عنا.
So my brother helped me, and it was a challenge, and I managed to actually ride the bike near my home, in the street near my home.
بعدين صار عندي شغف اكثر، ان انا عجبني الموضوع. اول حاجه فرصه انه الواحد يمارس رياضه ويتحرك. الشغله الثانيه انه انا هيني طلعت من البيت، شميت هواء بعيد عن الناس، ما فيش شيء اختلاط بحدا.
And I realized what a great advantage that is, that you could actually bike, be outside, get some fresh air without being in contact with anyone, and yet get the exercise you want.
هاي المرحلة كانت في أول 3 4 5 أيام. أجاني بعدين شعور ثاني إن أنا لازم أجيب دراجة خاصة بي وأبدأ من هاي الدراجة وأكمل. فشريت دراجة جديدة.
So 5 days later, I decided that I actually could get my own bike and see where this journey will take me.
بديت اتمرن في دراجتي بشكل فردي وبشكل شخصي لحد ما تمكنت. كنت بتفرج في الانترنت في اليوتيوب، بشوف عن الناس اللي ممكن تستخدم الدراجه، فاخذت سبورت اكثر، هيك عملت دعم نفسي لذاتي.
So I kept practicing on my bike, and I kept watching YouTube channel videos about riding the bike, and through that I felt very encouraged and heartened.
هذا اعطاني دافع اكبر ان انا ممكن انقل هاي التجربه لكثير من زملائي، لان انا دائما بحب اشارك تجربه الطرف الصناعي، تجربه تنظيف الطرف الصناعي، حمايه انفسنا من مشاكل الاطراف، التعامل مع الازمات بانواعها. فقلت لازم انقل تجربه الدراجه الهوائيه للشباب اللي عندهم بتر واصدقائي.
So this experience gave me a feeling that I need to pass this experience to, and this sport to people like me who struggle with amputated limbs and have to survive with prosthetic legs.
صورت فيديو في يوم، هيك كنت طالع زي جولة صغيرة في مكان في بيتنا، يعني في الحارة عندنا بنسميها. فالفيديو هذا صورته ونشرته على صفحتي على فيسبوك وانستغرام. لقيت اهتمام كثير كثير كبير من الناس، والكل صار يسألني بسكليت أو دراجة هوائية مع طرف صناعي كيف؟
So I did a video of myself and posted it on my Facebook and Instagram, and there was such a great response and feedback, and people started asking me, but how could that be with a bicycle with a prosthetic limb?
فكان هذا صراحة التحدي الأكبر، إن أنا أجاوب على كمية الأسئلة وأثبت للناس إنه هاي التجربة فعلا حقيقية، مش إن أنا بتحدى نفسي بهذا مقطع الفيديو، لا، لازم الناس تشوفني.
So it was a struggle to answer all the questions and really prove to them that this was honest. I wanted people to see me, that I am actually riding a bicycle with a prosthetic limb.
فتواصل معي صديق لي قال لي طب انا لازم اشوفك ولازم يعني اعرف شو موضوع البسكليت لاني حاب كثير ومهتم بهاي الفكره. فعلا زرت صديقي بالبسكليت بالدراجه الهوائيه ورحت عنده.
So a friend of mine approached me and said, you know, I really want to understand what you're doing. I want to see what you're doing. So he took his bike and went to see his friend.
رحت عند صديقي وهو اصر انه يستخدم الدراجه في نفس اليوم اللي وصلت عنده فيها، مع العلم انه هو عنده طرف صناعي كمان زيي، وفعلا عمل اول تجربه له، اول تيست، وثاني يوم راح اشترى دراجه جديده.
Yeah, so my friend who also has a prosthetic leg tried to ride my bicycle and was able to do it and was so encouraged he bought a bicycle for himself the next day.
بعد اسبوع احمد صار يطلع وينزل معي، نعمل فيديو مشترك، ستوري مشترك، شافنا صديق ثالث برضه صار عنده الشغف الاكبر في هذا الموضوع.
So my friend, whose name is Ahmed, started riding bikes with me and we started doing videos and posting. And then we had a third friend who joined us.
بعدين صار العدد يكبر، تفاصيل كثير ما بدي أطيل في ترجمتها. صار العدد يكبر لحد ما وصلنا إلى 12 أو 15 شاب عندهم دراجات هوائية بمجهود شخصي ومبادرة شخصية.
So our group grew and became 12 people with their own bicycles, and the 12 of them, of course, have prosthetic limbs and riding the bicycle.
شاركنا في مبادرات مجتمعية خاصة. في يوم الإعاقة العالمي كان قبل عام مع أحد المؤسسات العاملة في قطاع التأهيل في غزة.
We participated in a national day for the disabled and an organization that is based in Gaza.
كان في سباق صغير هيك عملناه، ما كنا بنعرف القوانين والتفاصيل الخاصة بالدراجات الهوائية، جاست إنه بنسوق البسكليت وبنمشي، بس هاي كنا نعرف ونتنافس.
So we decided to do a competition, but we really didn't know the rules, didn't know the procedures. So we just rode these bikes and started biking.
بعد هيك خلصنا هذا الحدث، صار عندنا لقاء صراحة في يوم جلسنا في البيت عند صديقي، في نفس الجلسة اللي راح أجلسها كمان شوي نحكي في نفس الموضوع. حكينا إنه إحنا لازم نعمل إشي بخصوص هذا الموضوع اللي هو الدراجات الهوائية.
So we decided, the group of us sat together and we decided we have to do something concrete with the bicycles.
بدأنا أول إشي حطيناه وحكينا فيه إنه إحنا لازم نروح لجوجل نفهم شو هو الباراسايكلينج، يعني شو الدراجات الهوائية للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. بحثنا عن القوانين وجبنا القوانين ترجمناها للعربي وبدأنا إيش ندرس زي طلاب المدرسة، نعرف القوانين وكل التفاصيل الخاصة بالدراجات.
So we went online and started researching paracycling to understand the rules and how would you engage in competition. And we really went down and we translated the rules into Arabic and we sat and became students to study this type of competition. Yeah.
فشكرا لجوجل إنه عرفنا القوانين كلها. وبعدين عملنا إشي اسمه لجنة الدراجات الهوائية للأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة تحت اللقب العام الكبير درجوا البتر فلسطين.
So under the umbrella of Better Palestine, we started a commission. هيك اسمها ناجي؟
amputee cyclist.
Amputee cyclist. Yes, Palestinian amputee cyclist. Yes.
Yes. هاي الفكرة صراحة احتاجت منا تفكير، كوننا شكلنا لجنة خاصة فينا، فاللجنة هاي لازم يكون في لها لوائح وقوانين بتنظمها وبتحكمها.
So we had to go back and decide on the kind of rules and procedures that's going to govern our commission.
اجتهدنا في عمل لوائح تعتمد إلى القانون الفلسطيني الخاص بالأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة والاتفاقية الدولية الخاصة بحقوق الأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة.
So ما فهمت بالضبط.
اوكي. كان الفكره من النظام اللي بيحكم هاي القوانين الخاصه بلجنه الدراجات اللي هي قائمه على مبدا القانون من الاتفاقيه الدوليه الخاصه بحقوق الاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه.
So we had to make sure that the rules that govern this commission align with the international laws of people for that govern commissions for people with disability.
هاي شغله ثانيه، ركزنا على مبدا مصفوفه التاهيل الخاصه بتاهيل الاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه. المصفوفه في احد بنودها الاساسيه بتحكي انه الرياضه جزء مهم من عمليه الدمج للاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه في مجتمعاتهم.
So we focused on a point that is in the international conventions, which says that rehabilitation of people who lost their limbs or amputees has to focus on sports, and sports is a very important tool in helping people integrate back into society.
هاي الشغلات فرضت علينا فكرة إنه الموضوع مش بس دراجة هوائية وتنافس سباقات. شاركنا في 3-4 سباقات، صار عندنا منتخب فلسطين للدراجات الهوائية الآن.
So we participated in several competitions, and now we have a Palestinian league for paracyclists.
هاي التجارب كلها وصلتنا لمرحلة إنه اللجنة لازم كمان تشتغل مع أقراننا من ذوي الإعاقة، من الناس اللي عندهم بتر في أطرافهم، لحتى ننقل التجربة لهم في أكثر من جانب.
And we decided to actually share our experience with other people who are amputees, not necessarily only limbs. Yeah.
تمام. هاي الشغلة كمان كثير كان لها دور مهم في إنه إحنا نتواصل مع الشباب اللي فقدوا أطرافهم حديثاً، مع الأطفال كمان لحتى يشوفونا ويعيشوا التجربة اللي معانا.
We wanted to encourage people who are just lost their limbs and are going through very difficult experiences. We wanted to show them and encourage them, show them what we have achieved.
يعني احنا صح ما تخطينا الصعوبات والتحديات اللي مرينا فيها، لكن في كثير من زملائنا لسه بيعانوا من حالة نفسية سيئة، من صعوبات وتحديات نتيجة الإصابة.
You know, maybe we, the people who belong to this organization, have overcome many obstacles, but we also know many people like us who are still struggling and going through very difficult psychological and emotional experiences.
في هذا الموضوع فرض علينا انه عمل اللجنه صار مطلوب منا انه احنا ننفذ لقاءات توعويه حول الاعاقه، حول حالات البتر المتكرره.
So our role expanded to increasing public awareness of disabilities and how to overcome disabilities and how to integrate into life.
كمان ننفذ لقاءات مع الناس اللي فقدوا أطرافهم حديثاً داخل المستشفيات على مبدأ دعم الأقران، لحتى نتابع معاهم من بداية الفقد إلى مرحلة إعادة دمجهم في المجتمع من جديد.
And another thing that we started doing is visiting hospitals to meet with people who just lost their limbs, to give them and accompany them through their journey, their healing journey, and help them back into society.
يعني للأسف الشهر الأخير في شخصين من اللي أصيبوا في مسارات العودة قبل عامين فقدوا أطرافهم الشهر الماضي نتيجة الالتهابات وصعوبة الإصابة اللي كانت موجودة عندهم.
There are, you know, unfortunately, there are two individuals who were severely injured during the March of Return and just recently had to lose their limbs because of the infections and the damage they experienced.
كمان احنا صرنا نركز في اللقاءات الخاصة بالأطفال اللي فقدوا أطرافهم. كان قبل أسبوع عندنا لقاء مع جمعية فلسطين لكرة القدم البتر، Palestinian Football Amputee Association. هاي الجمعية بتنفذ أنشطة ترفيهية للأطفال، كرة القدم بالعكازات.
And we also had recently we had a meet where we focused a lot of our work on children. For example, we recently had a meeting with soccer league for disabled children, and they play soccer with crutches.
هاي التجارب كلها نتيجة المبادرة اللي أطلقناها لاستخدام الدراجة الهوائية. اليوم الدراجة بتوصلنا لكل زملائنا اللي عندهم إعاقات بكافة إعاقاتهم، بتخلينا نتواصل أكثر. كمان الدراجة بتكسر كثير حواجز عند شباب، بتخليهم مش جالسين في البيت، بالعكس بتعطيهم طاقة إيجابية لحتى يتفاعلوا في مجتمعاتهم أكثر.
So the bicycle became the tool that helped us overcome many obstacles. It gave amputees the ability to move freely, and it started inspiring other people to have hope and move forward.
عندنا قصص نجاح كثير مميزة. مش كل الحالات الموجودة هي بتقود بحالة كثير معنوية رائعة، يعني في تفاوت في الحالة المعنوية والنفسية عند الشباب، لكن في فعلا قصص نجاح كثير مميزة عند الشباب الموجودين في الفريق عندنا.
So not everybody, the emotional healing and progress is not equal among all members who have participated in the cycling, but we have many success stories.
مثلا صديقنا محمد هو كان تارك الدراسة بسبب الإعاقة والحالة اللي مر فيها. لما صار عندنا في فريق الدراجات الآن هو بطل في المنتخب، بينافس على المركز الأول والثاني باستمرار. الآن رجع لمدرسته لحتى يكمل الثانوية العامة ويروح للجامعة إن شاء الله في العام القادم.
Oh, wow. So my friend Muhammad left his left school because of the amputation he endured and didn't want to leave the house. But when he became part of our cycling team, the paracycling team, he became a champion. And now he returned to school. He's finishing his high school and is planning to go to university next year.
هاي القصص كلها بتعطينا دافع لحتى نكمل على مبدأ إنه الإعاقة عمرها ما كانت حاجز.
And these stories give us, you prove to us that disability is never an obstacle.
وبصراحة كمان صارت تعطينا مسؤولية مجتمعية. يعني صار يجينا شعور أنا وأربعة خمسة من أصدقائي إنه إحنا لازم نستمر في نقل التجارب، لأن شعرنا إنه هذه الحالة هي حالة صحية تخدم الناس.
And what we realized that we felt we have a social responsibility to or a collective responsibility to people like us, and we wanted to pass this experience to others.
هاي الخبرات كلها اللي بننقلها وبنحكيها كانت نتيجة برضو لقاءات كثير استفدناها. استفدنا من برامج الصحة النفسية نفذتها وزارة الصحة مع اللجنة الدولية للصليب الأحمر. استفدنا من مشاريع التدريب والتعليم اللي دربتنا على الحقوق الخاصة بالأشخاص ذوي الإعاقة. المهارات هذه تركت عندنا خبرات كبيرة اليوم احنا بننقلها لزملائنا اللي يمكن هم مش لاقين هاي الفرص.
And the experience of building this movement gave us, forced us to learn and understand rules and have skills that has helped us to move forward, and it gave us an opportunity that's not offered to others.
لهيك احنا اليوم درجوه البتر فلسطين او لجنه الدراجات الهوائيه للاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه. بنمارس الرياضه، بنمارس برامج الدعم النفسي، بنمارس برامج دعم الاقران، بنحاول نكون داعمين ونزور كل الناس. كثير قصص بتمنى انه في يوم من الايام نقدر نحكيها في منصه بشكل موسع وتكون مترجمه بكل اللغات، لانه احنا عندنا سنه مليانه نجاحات، لكن انا ما بدي اطيل اكثر في الوقت.
I don't want to take too much of your time, but we have such an incredible array of success stories that we want to pass on. We want to share it with others like us and to share it with you. And our dream is that these stories will be publicized and translated in every language.
بتمنى انه كمان تنتهي المعاناة اللي بيعيش الشعب الفلسطيني نتيجة الحروب المستمرة، نتيجة الواقع المستمر، نتيجة الأمراض المفروضة، نتيجة الحصار، ونعيش واقع أفضل.
And my desire and my wish is for the fate of the Palestinian people to improve. We want the siege on Gaza to end. We want to have an opportunity to have a better life and to end the occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people.
احنا اليوم انا لما بحكي ما بحكي باسم ناجي بشكل شخصي، اوكي تجربتي انا بفتخر فيها وبحب انقلها للناس، لكن كمان بحكي بمجموعه كبير من الناس اللي بتطمح انه كمان تمثل فلسطين في محافل دوليه، تشارك في سباقات دوليه خاصه بالاشخاص ذوي الاعاقه. هذا الشيء موجود، وبنتمنى صوتنا يصل دائما للعالميه لحتى نعزز اكثر مفاهيم عند الناس انه احنا شعب قادر رغم كل الصعوبات اللي بمر فيها، واحنا على ابواب استحقاقات دوليه ان شاء الله في العام القادم.
I mean, it's true, I speak on my own behalf as Naji, but I also speak, I am sure that many people like me wish to demonstrate to the world the resilience of the Palestinian people, and that we can, and at some point be able to participate in international competitions and international activities with paracycling.
هاي يمكن شوي مش عارف بالمختصر او بالطويل، بس هاي قصة اذا بتحبوا تشوفوا اكثر راح اشير مع دكتورة نادرة مجموعة فيديوهات خاصة بينا كدراجين موثقة من كثير صحفيين، تشوفوها وتعرفوا اكثر، وتشوفوا صفحتنا على الفيسبوك. شكرا لاستماعكم، واذا اي حدا عنده استفسار انا كمان بحب اسمعكم واعرف منكم اكثر.
Naji will be sharing more of their videos and posts, so we can share it also with our audience. But I think that شكرا كثير ناجي. بفكر نرجع لنفس النقطة، أقوى أنواع السيادة هي الأمل. The most powerful mode of sovereignty is hope. And if you hear the hope, the power in Naji's voice, if you feel how from wounding, from pain, from the flesh that is marked by dispossession, we hear the power of collectivity, of trying to create a community of hope through biking, through trying his brother's bike to start with, something that is smaller and not exactly. This is why I thought that bringing Naji's voice is so important, because it is biking, but it's about psychological support, as Naji have taught me the past 2 weeks in our discussions. It's about going out of home, Mazboot Naji. It's about leaving, it's about moving, it's about being active, it's about a collectivity, it's about cohesion, it's about continuity and the support. But I want to go, so thank you very much for your voice, for your power, for your hope, for where you take us always. يعني عن جد دائما بتاخذني لمحلات بتجنن بصوتك، بحكيك، بكلماتك. I want to come back to Dr. Ghassan and to ask you, because some of the issues that Naji have raised in his testimonies, you know, as a child that was 13, as an amputee, as trying to excavate a mode of hope, of power amidst, you know, really debility and disability. And I want your input regarding, first of all, medical issues that were mentioned that we don't really understand well, if you can share with us, and also your own experience about children that have faced similar experiences, maybe something that stayed with you, because Naji was telling us, and you were telling us before, read the wounding, read that story of wounding. So Dr. Ghassan, but you need to unmute yourself.
So,
and then I will open the question, and I'll open for questions. And
so one of the things that Naji mentioned, unfortunately, towards the end, which is the fact that 2 of the great marches of return wounded have had amputations recently. Highlights the fact that actually, as a result of COVID and also as a result of the continuing siege, there are still around 350 of the wounded in the Great Marches of Return who still need complex reconstructive surgery. That intentional targeting of almost 8,000 Palestinians by Israeli snipers, 90% to the lower limbs, with the aim of mutilating them and with the aim of disabling them, has left a legacy. And the issue of these delayed amputations highlights several things. First of all, it highlights the disabled health system that is unable to provide for a disproportionate number of wounds that are extremely complex. I mean, there is no health system in the world, be it in the UK or France or the US, that could have coped with thousands of young men with highly complex injuries to their limbs, as the Palestinian health system had to. Two, the destruction of the infrastructure in Gaza, the siege, a multitude of things means that 90% of the wounded ended up with what we call multi-drug resistant infections. So these are the bacteria that are resistant to 3 or more antibiotics. And so multi-drug resistant infection of the bone, osteomyelitis, is found in 40%, found in 90% of these wounding, according to MSF. With regards to one of the things that we lack, especially in Gaza, one of the things that I've always fought, unfortunately still unsuccessfully fought, is called in Arabic مؤسسة الجريح. We need an institution that allows a voice and provides patient-centered care for the wounded in Gaza across the whole of their lifetime. What happens in Gaza as a result of the kind of repeated onslaughts is that the wounded of the last war are always forgotten because there's a new emergency, and that kind of repeated emergency means that these patients do not receive the kind of holistic multidisciplinary care that they need, because they end up being pushed to the end of the queue with every new war. And so it's critical for us to keep going back to this idea that these, that the provision of timely mental health support, the provision of social support to these wounded is what differentiates stories like those of Naji from stories of people whose wounds meant that they are still stuck in the house, that they are developing now secondary injuries as a result of the fact that they're wheelchair bound, or that they're not receiving the right care, that they have lost out on their education, a multitude of other things that happen because life in Gaza is difficult when you're able-bodied. So when you are injured, it is easily subsumes you. That continuous flood easily pulls you down, and you're unable to be able to swim your way back up to at the end of each of these attacks. And so it's critical for us to kind of push for that kind of institution that places these wounded at the center of the care, and then fights for their ability to receive clinical care and mental health care and social care and economic help, rather than leaving the patient up to the wounded up to their own circumstances.
Should we take questions, since you're breaking up so much, Dr. Ghassan? We're barely.
I mean, Yeah.
You're
Go
really
ahead.
up. Can we open up for
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The audience, yeah. أسئلة, any questions to Dr. Ghassan, to Naji? Maybe I should translate Naji's name. Naji is a survivor. Anyway, his name is also interesting. So Naji is a double survivor somehow. Yes, دكتورة خلود. تفضلي. Yeah, you need to unmute yourself, please.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Dr. Ghassan. Thank you, Naji. Thank you, musicians, for everything that you presented today and for this important session. Among other sessions that you are doing every now and then. I actually don't know if the camera is on or...
It's on.
Okay. I just want to say that the struggle is big. And I'm a professor in community medicine and public health. And Dr. Ghassan, if you're in Gaza, we founded the School of Public Health with Dr. Yahya Abed since late 90s. Somehow to contribute to the development of the health sector in general and the mindset of the culture of health. And as you mentioned that there are a lot of things to be done. And I don't want to talk about many things, but I want just to emphasize things that Naji mentioned and you, Nadia, and Dr. Ghassan talked about in this session. In health, we work for promoting health and preventing disability, discomfort, and premature death as much as possible. And this mission is very difficult in the times of occupation. And when we talk about prevention, it's something like we say, dirham wuqaya khayrun min qantari ilaj. It's something that goes all way, and the sky is the limit. Like it doesn't stop. It's not like only preventing the disease from happening. It's like preventing any complication, preventing like depression, preventing despair, preventing complications. So what Naji did is like bringing more life. And we want to keep people living, and we want to add years to lives, but we want to add life to these years. So you brought life to your years with your disability. And this is unfortunately what happens in our country and in other countries where the health system lack resources and can't provide the real health needs to people. So people, what you did, Naji, it's what we call like bypassing the policies and creating a community policy, youth policy, like stating that we want a life and we want to be on the map and we want to show all the world who we are. But actually, like Dr. Ghassan said, the health system should do everything, including not only the surgery and treatment, but also the social, the mental, psychological, and occupational rehabilitation of each one who suffered with disability.
Thank you, Khulud. Thank you,
So
Dr.
there's a lot to be done, and you're bringing more hope. You're bringing, with this hope, you're bringing more life to what's going in Gaza. The more we bring life and health, the more we have more hope and
Shukran.
more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khulud. Yeah, Colin?
Yes, congratulations to both speakers, wonderful. What I'm intrigued by is the whole mental health side of this. project, because we're involved with psychiatrists and a cluster of psychiatrists and psychologists in Gaza. And we have so far been involved with art and music, and not so much sport, and certainly not with disabled sport. And I wondered if you would welcome a sort of a collaboration between your organization and another organization which would be able to provide psychiatric help if you wanted it. You may not feel the need for it, but I just wonder, I'm asking a question, would you welcome that?
ناجي السؤال إلك بقول إنه هل أنت بتستقبل، لأنهم بيقولوا إنه محاولة كولين وتجربته في الفن وفي الموسيقى ما كانش عندهم تجربة في الرياضة، ومن خلال الفن والموسيقى كان في إمكانية للدعم النفسي للمصابين. هل ممكن إنه تتقبلوا مساعدة كمان بالفن والموسيقى بالإضافة للرياضة؟ رح أرجع لك في كمان سؤال لمارتن وبرجع لك. Martin, I just translated the question to Naji. We'll come back to both Dr. Ghassan and Naji for our conclusion. Martin?
Just a couple of questions. One to Naji, and it's perhaps related. It's just about whether he's had a response from sporting organizations and organizations either representing or organized by people with disabilities outside. You know, what's the international response, and is there a kind of network? Is his group able to be part of a network of, you know, which would involve consciousness raising and challenging people's perceptions? I think. I've got a question to Ghassan. The mental health networks kind of exist in a way to challenge the appalling collusion of mainstream mental health services in the West with the settler colonial regime, justified in various kind of ways. But what you were speaking of, and what Naji sort of obviously brings as well, is the sort of barbaric nature of settler colonialism anywhere. You know, settler colonialism in itself is a barbaric practice, and I was wondering, is there a political response from within your own profession? You know, the narrow profession of plastic surgeons in this. Is that an area of contention? Have you been able to take your experiences there and to sort of confront colleagues in the West, or you know, in the North, or whatever, and in the wider medical field? That was my question.
Okay. Okay. ناجي، كان في سؤال من مارتن بقول هل في هناك مجموعات داعمة عالمية. I think that Naji was actually telling me that there is a group in Northern Ireland. You were talking about the Northern Ireland biking group that was supporting the Gazan. So can you tell them more?
MBT football, not biking group. MBT football.
Yeah. So he was wondering whether you have any groups that is إذا في عندك مجموعات عالمية اللي تدعم شغلكم، ومين هن، وهل أنتم باتصال مع networks عالمية في هذا المجال. And Dr. Ghassan, you heard the question. So should we start with you, ناجي؟ بدك تبدأ؟
ما فيش مشكلة، تفضل دكتور إذا بحب.
دكتور غسان، تفضل.
So I mean, I recall when I went to Palestine in 2002 during the first Intifada, second Intifada, I took time off work. I took unpaid leave and went to Palestine to work in Gaza. And I was told in no uncertain terms by my mentors is that that's a bit of your experience you need to leave off your CV, because it does become an obstacle to career advancement and you being taken seriously. And then, you know, in 2009, I was told by my then bosses that they would completely support me going to Gaza during the war. And that has shown how actually public opinion, mainstream public opinion within mainstream conservative small capitals, small c, in the medical establishment in the UK has changed over those years as a result of testimonies of health workers who have worked in Palestine, have come back to the UK. So things have improved. The other thing that is getting better is within the humanitarian sector, an acceptance that emergency care and trauma care in the form of war surgery has to be accompanied with mental health support, and that somehow mental health support is an afterthought is actually very self-defeating, even from a purely narrow clinical outcome, that unless you provide mental health support for people with such severe injuries, you're not going to be able to get them through the treatment process. And when they are done at the end of a very arduous and tormenting treatment pathway, if you haven't supported them with mental health throughout, what is left is incapable of returning to normal life or having a productive life. So things are becoming, within the humanitarian sector, things are becoming better, and we're getting a better understanding of the need for integrated trauma surgery, integrating mental health with trauma surgery from the very beginning. And things have changed. I mean, one of the reasons why there's such a kind of rabid attack happening against Palestinian voices and against pro-Palestinian voices from Western governments, be it the German government or the UK government or the French government, is because there has been such a major shift in mainstream public opinion about accepting and understanding the Palestinian narrative.
Ghassan, we lost you.
That's it. So yeah,
We lost you.
saying over to Naji for him.
Right. Naji,
Hello?
تفضل. Yeah. Naji.
تمام تمام، اسمعوني. السؤال الاخير كان في كونتاكت دولي مع جروبات مثلا داعم من الاشي. صراحه دكتوره وصديقنا اللي سال انه احنا يعني عمرنا سنه فعليا في العمل 6 أو 7 شهور، بنحاول نجتهد. انا كنت في اوروبا قبل اقل من شهر، رجعت لغزه جديد. كنت بحاول اني احكي عن فكره الدراجات الهوائيه في فرنسا، في بلجيكا. كنت بحاول اوصل الفكره بالشكل الصحيح، لكن ككونتاكت رسمي مع اي جهه رسميه ما عندنا. بنرسل ايميلات لكثير ناس، وبرضه دعم رسمي لتمكين وتطوير الرياضه بشكل رسمي برضه ما عندنا. انا حكيت هي مبادره شبابيه، بنحاول نخلق شيء مميز يكون جديد، وان شاء الله مستقبلا بكون في عندنا تواصل مع اصدقاء يدعموا هاي الرياضه ويطوروا اهداف ورؤيه المنظومه بشكل عام.
You want me to translate, Nadira? Oh, you're muted, Nadira. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I hope I got all of it. I got distracted for a second. Naji is saying that the organization is just 1 year old, and they do have contacts with other outside organizations. I understood Naji saying that he is open for such communication. Nadira, yes?
Yeah, he's
Yes.
open. As he said, it's 1 year, 6 months. They were very, very active. They tried that he was abroad. He try to aware different European countries about their activism. So far, they don't have support for their, you know, and I have discussed it with him, you know, bicycles, for example. Naji was saying that there are some girls that are interested also, but the issue of purchasing a bike, the issue of participating in the different programs, it's still new. Yes, so it's all new, and we hope that we'll continue following up with Naji and continue following up with this type. There are two other questions. Can we take them, Dr. Omar and Vivian? So let's start with one of you. Go ahead. You're both.
Okay.
Yes, تفضل.
I can start, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, hello everybody, good evening. I am Omar, a psychiatrist from Gaza. It's not a question, but only some, I want to tell about my experience in working with amputees and experience in working with people with disabilities. Dr. Ghassan spoke about, very good about the physical suffering of the amputees. I can tell something about their mental health suffering, about psychological consequences of amputations. Yeah, I work with many of them. Really, they have severe problems, severe suffering. Most of them have severe mental health problems after amputation. Many of them have depression, PTSD, anxiety, and some of them have addiction even. And I can talk about social consequences. They are suffering from discriminations and the stigma. They have many social problems. Some of them have family problems after amputation. So they face really very, very severe problems. I can say it is psychological scars, yeah, more than physical scars. For healing, they need a long time. Some of them need special programs for adaptation and reintegration with the society again, really, because they become very far isolated after amputation. Here in Gaza, there is many programs dealing with amputees and with people with disabilities. This program's goals to reintegration, to reintegrate them again in society and to be active again. And I think many of them are succeed. We have many success stories here in Gaza. One of them, Naji, a friend of mine. I knew him so much. Hello, Naji. And he is one of the leaders, I can say, of the amputees here in Gaza. And they work very hard to overcome their problems and to relive again as normal life. And really, they have fantastic, amazing activities here in Gaza. And they succeed in many issues. And I think we can, and if the international, some international societies and the organization can provide some helps for them to continue and to help others amputee in Gaza, it will be very, very good. And thanks you, Naji. Thanks you, Dr. Ghassan. Thanks, Nadira.
شكرا دكتور
شكرا
عمر.
دكتور عمر. دكتور عمر أول حدا اشتغل معي في برامج الصحة النفسية قبل 7 سنوات.
دكتور عمر
وأنا
was
ذكرت
first to
وأنا
work
ذكرت
with-
البرنامج وما بعرف إنه موجود.
He's
حلو
mentioned
دكتور.
that Dr. Omar is the first to work with him on mental health issues 7 years ago. Thank you, Dr. Omar, for sharing.
Thanks.
Vivian,
Thanks.
Vivian, you're muted.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm a Palestinian American here, mental health counselor, specialized in trauma, PTSD. So thank you, Ms. Nadra, Dr. Ghassan, and Naji for being here and allow this opportunity for me to be part of it. I'm just a beginner trying to understand how the impact of trauma and PTSD on the Palestinian children and adult, Palestinian adults, they're still under the occupation and still under these traumatic events. This is probably one of my first time and first, attending this type of conference to introduce myself, to understand, like, where is that coming from. I'm interested to understand more about the clinical work. So appreciate the introduction from Dr. Omar, and say like there is some efforts there in Gaza and Palestine about addressing the mental health, because I can't imagine, how is it hard, like, to build up resiliency from a traumatic experience. Naji, thanks for sharing your story with us. It's very empowering, and I do appreciate the opportunity that you took your trauma to empower you and empower others. I'm so proud of you. I'm sure, like, the people around you, you're an aspiration, they look up to you and to your experience. But I'm more interested to know, as I said, like, this is my very first time dipping my feet into understanding, like, how the trauma is affecting the Palestinian children and Palestinian adults. So I'm interested to hear more, Naji, about your experience, like, the challenges that you went through as a child that helped to empower you, helped to build resiliency. And also interested to know what clinical services and resources are available for the Palestinian children there, and also adults, to address these very important psychological injuries and wounded beside the physical ones. So that would be my question. And thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. I translated the question to Naji.
اوكي
I typed it. But I want to say
جاوب ولا
something.
لسه؟
هقول بس شيء واحد قبل ما تجاوب. I just want to say one thing, Vivian, before you go on, is that at least our experiences is that the concept of PTSD does not fit Palestine, because it's a continuous accumulative trauma, and therefore the issue is not about a post-traumatic stress disorder, as you've heard from Dr. Ghassan, as you've heard from Dr. Omar, we've heard from Dr. Yasser previously, from Dr. Muhammad. It's really a continuation, and we've already talked about it in our discussion, and you can hear it now كمان from ناجي. بقول ناجي كنت إنه القصة إنه عنا مش بس صدمة، إنما هي صدمة مستمرة وصدمة اللي ما عم تخلص، وبالتالي النظر إلها كإشي ما بعد الصدمة هو مش بالضبط ما بعد، لأنه الصدمة مش خالصة. بس السؤال الأساسي اللي سألتك إياه زي ما قلت لك، انه ايش هي الخدمات، ايش هي تجربتك كطفل، شو الامور اللي ساعدتك وشو الامور اللي خدمتك، وين هي الصعوبات الاساسيه اللي كانت. سؤال كثير حلو، شكرا فيفين، تفضل.
هو صراحه زي ما حكيت لنا في الحديث، انه مش سهل اي انسان يفقد شيء من جسده، لكن الاصعب انه الانسان يكمل. انا بصراحه والدي كان دارس، هو في الاساس خدمه اجتماعيه، وكان كثير قريب مني، واخوتي 4 اكبر مني وواحد اصغر مني، وفي صبيتين كمان اكبر مني. بعرفش العيله من حوالي ما تعاملوا معي كحاله انسانيه، كشخص ذوي اعاقه. بالعكس، في بدايه المرض اهتموا في موضوع الرعايه اوكي والاصابه. بعد ما طلعت من المستشفى صار التعامل انه اذا بتحب تروح الحمام ممكن تعتمد على حالك، بتحب تاكل ممكن تعتمد على حالك زي قبل. فهاي الشغلات انا شعرت فيها بعد ما كبرت. تمام. لقيت انه تعامل اهلي معي، وبالذات يعني ابوي وامي بشكل كثير، انه بدناش اياك تعتمد على غيرك، اعتمد على نفسك اكثر. لما درست وعرفت في مجال الاعاقه عرفت انه هاي الشغلات هي اساسا لازم تنعمل. فصارت من اهلي تجاهي بطريقه، ما بعرفش هي كانت مباشره بس بتوقع انها مباشره من ابوي، انه انا خلوني اعتمد على حالي. وكان اصرار اهلي كمان ان نرجع للمدرسه، والاصرار الاكبر انه اركب طرف صناعي في اقصر وقت. يعني انا فقدت رجلي بعد 4 شهور، كنت مركب اول طرف صناعي. شاءت الاقدار هيك، يعني مش انه احنا ناس خارقين بس، لا، شاءت الاقدار من خلال اجتهاد مستمر. فكنت مركب اول طرف صناعي بعد اول 4 شهور. لما رجعت للمدرسه بالطرف الصناعي حاولت اتعايش مع الوضع. اهلي مدير مدرستي ما تعامل معي كحاله انسانيه، كانوا شويه برضو داعمين ومهتمين اكثر. وبديت في الحياه انه اهلي دائما كمل، شخص نورمال ما عنده إعاقة، أو ما تعاملوا مع الإعاقة إنه هي سبب إني أكمل حياتي بصعوبة وبتحدي. لا، كانوا بس داعمين لإلي، بوجهوني للمسار الصح، وانطلقت من هذا المجال.
If I may translate a bit fast, and if I leave something Lama add, is that Naji was saying that he was not defined by his disability. His father is a social worker, and they took it from a different perspective. So something that he was asked to take the lead, to take care of himself, not to rely on others. And therefore, maybe the training of his father as a social worker to go to the bathroom alone, to be able to go to school. And when he went to school, his principal did not define him and relate to him as a disabled and as a child with disability, but rather he took him as Naji, as a person, as a normal person, and that, as according to his testimony, have helped him. Did I miss anything, Lama?
It's one, no, it's excellent. Just one thing that Naji feels, having the prosthetic leg just 4 months after the injury really helped. But that just happened, you know, fate had it that he had the prosthetic leg so soon after the injury.
Right.
مش بالواسطة بالمعنى، بس مشيت يعني.
صعب
لا بلاش ترجمة هاي، بلاش بلاش.
Okay. Let me, I just wanted us to conclude by asking, because, you know.
But Nadira, that also plays it.
Dr. Ghassan, we're unable to hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is again, as a result of the destruction of the health system. I mean, basically, Naji was very lucky that the surgeon who did the amputation did the right kind of amputation with the right characteristics of the amputations that are designed to allow early prosthetics. And that's one of the things that needs to be invested in. And that's, again, has to be, has a lot to do with the fact that, you know, part of the decolonization that needs to happen about the decolonization of medical and clinical knowledge. That in Palestine, we still teach medicine that comes from the north. And therefore, war injuries, although they are an endemic disease in Gaza,
yeah,
you can call them an endemic disease in Gaza, are not reflected in the training both undergraduate and postgraduate, to the detriment a lot of the patients like Naji, who's lucky that others I know need only surgeries because they don't get the right treatment, because the medical sector the needs of the local population.
Yeah. Thank you. But I think that you have said it so carefully, Dr. Ghassan, and so powerfully. You've said something like, life is hard when you're able, let alone when you're unable. You've said it clearly in your, and unfortunately, we need to conclude our Cafe Palestine, but, and I apologize, Dr. Khulud, but by really listening carefully to our speakers, we can fetch for more ways to expel coloniality and its unending debilitation. And here I'm really calling you to act internationally, not only on listening and understanding, but really on pushing your government, your representative, because Dr. Ghassan and Naji's attention, really attention to the flesh, to the wound, to the disability as ability should really challenge us all to consider first a serious listening and to be inspired, embodied, and worldly knowledges of the speakers. And second, to consider our particular responsibility. So if Naji is telling us, I took responsibility of myself in moving, in doing, in committing, we must commit ourselves as mental health workers, as people that are responsible. We must commit to decoloniality, and decolonization lies in our capacity to provoke questions, to challenge those in power, and to demand a war against this unending settler colonial war that can leave Gaza, Palestinians breathless. So I'm really calling in this cafe to move ahead and look at, Naji was lucky to have a father and a family that was, when he talked about ihtidan, the word ihtidan, this hugging, this containing, this embracing, but it's, as Dr. Ghassan have said clearly, the health system is collapsing, the continuous wars, the situation in Gaza, the constant wounding and children's wounding, the unchilding is hard at work, and it's becoming a political capital in the hands of the state. So our role is not only to listen, to really find ways and to fetch, to create new ways, to challenge those in power and to refuse to accept this continuous war of turning Gaza into a laboratory and turning Palestinians into bodies that are marking the settler colonial power. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you very much, Dr. Ghassan. Shukran كتير, Naji, for your powerful voices. Thank you all for staying with us. And I hope that we will continue from here to take the additional steps to changing the situation.
شكرا دكتورة.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, everybody.
So much, everyone.
Well done.
بحب اشوف الرسائل وينها كيف حتضل.
افتح شات. بضل لانه مسجل لانه
خلص اذا في ريكورد باخده من نادرة. تمام اوكي.
ببعث لك اياه اكيد.
يلا باي باي يعطيكم العافية.
نحكي احنا هلا كم من يوم.
اوكي.
باي باي. شكرا كثير.